You ever just stop and think about how our massive global societies actually work? I mean, how can millions, even billions of total strangers manage to coordinate, cooperate, and have these huge political conversations without everything just falling apart? Okay, let's get into it because the answer is truly one of the most incredible stories about what it means to be human.
The historian Yuval Harari just hits the nail on the head here. He frames the central challenge perfectly. You see, it's not just about agreeing with each other. It's about our ability to wrap our heads around experiences, fears, and hopes that are completely alien to our own lives. And that ability right there, to understand things indirectly, that's the very foundation of how we communicate on a massive scale.
So, yeah, how do we do it? How do we possibly bridge that enormous gap between what we know from our own lives and the inner world of a complete stranger? Well, it turns out the answer starts deep, deep inside our own brains. It turns out we're born with this incredibly sophisticated toolkit for understanding other people. It's a whole set of neural mechanisms that let us simulate, predict, and ultimately connect with the people all around us. So let's pop open the lid and take a look at the key tools in this kit. All right, first up, we've got something scientists call theory of mind. This is the fundamental, game-changing realization that the world inside your head is totally different from the world inside my head. It's the engine that lets us step into someone else's shoes and ask, what might they be thinking? What do they really want? This all relies heavily on parts of our brain like the prefrontal cortex, and honestly, it is the bedrock of all social reasoning. Next up in the toolkit is empathy. And you gotta know, empathy isn't just one thing. It's really important to split it into two parts. First, there's cognitive empathy. That's the understanding part. And it's closely tied to theory of mind. It's when you can look at someone and recognize and even name the emotion they're experiencing. But then there's emotional empathy. That's when you actually feel a version of that emotion yourself. So you've got the thinking part and you've got the feeling part. Both are crucial. Now, what's powering a lot of this? This is where it gets really cool. Let's talk about mirror neurons. These brain cells are absolutely remarkable. They're like a built-in simulator. When you see someone smile, your mirror neurons that are linked to smiling fire up as if you were the one smiling. This lets us understand actions and intentions not by thinking about them, but by unconsciously and internally mimicking them. It's wild. So you put it all together, theory of mind, both kinds of empathy, and these amazing mirror neurons, and what do you get? You get a brain that is fundamentally, biologically built for social connection. We are literally wired to get each other on a deep, intuitive level. But okay, this toolkit is great for one-on-one. How on earth do we scale it up to millions of people? Well, we scale it up with our single most powerful invention, language. You can think of language as the technology that takes our own individual internal feelings and weaves them into a vast shared reality. But as we're about to see, this incredible tool has a serious dual nature. Language can be a bridge or it can be a wall. On one hand, it lets us build these powerful shared stories, persuade each other, and create a common sense of reality and understanding. But on the other hand, that exact same power can be used to frame issues in a manipulative way, to reinforce our group identities, and to draw a really sharp line between us and them. It's the same tool, just pointed in opposite directions. And in those huge political conversations we were talking about, this becomes unbelievably important. Language isn't just about trading facts back and forth. Politicians use rhetoric to persuade. Media outlets frame issues to make you see them in a certain light. We even make sense of really complex ideas through metaphors, like when we talk about political arguments as if we're winning a war. Our conversations, our entire discourse, it doesn't just describe our reality, it actively builds it. Okay, so if we're all wired for empathy and we have this powerful tool of language, why is there so much division and misunderstanding? Well, this is where our social psychology can actually override our individual neuroscience. The moment we form groups, the whole game changes. This all comes down to a cornerstone of social psychology called social identity theory. Basically, a huge part of who you think you are, your self-esteem, your sense of self, is tied to the groups you belong to. It could be your nationality, your political party, your favorite sports team. Whatever it is, you have a deep psychological need to see your in-group in a positive light. And that often means seeing out-groups as, well, less so. And the effects of this are dramatic. Inside our group, communication is way easier, we trust each other more, we cooperate. But when we look at other groups, distrust and stereotypes can become the default. Communication just breaks down. And this is critical. Knowledge gets trapped. Information and experiences really struggle to cross that divide, which makes that original challenge of understanding what you haven't experienced almost impossible. And get this, here's a fascinating and kind of counterintuitive twist. You'd think the biggest fights would be between groups that are polar opposites, right? But very often, the most intense animosity, what social scientists call horizontal hostility, is between groups that are actually incredibly similar, fighting over tiny little differences. And that's because those small distinctions suddenly become crucial for defining who we are versus who they are. Okay, so on one hand, we have these amazing biological tools for connection. On the other, we have these powerful social forces pulling us into tribes. This whole situation sets up the central challenge of our time. How do we actually bridge these divides and find a real path to dialogue? So here it is. This is the central tension, the real tug of war. Our brains are ready and willing to connect, but our group loyalties are constantly pulling us apart. Just acknowledging this internal conflict is the first step. We have to make a conscious choice to fire up our tools for empathy instead of just defaulting to our tribal instincts. So what can we actually do? The research gives us a pretty clear roadmap. Step 1, you have to build trust and psychological safety. People will not open up if they feel threatened. Step 2, consciously focus on common ground, not the little differences, to short-circuit that horizontal hostility we talked about. Step 3, you can build real cohesion through shared, positive experiences. And finally, step 4, we have to deliberately choose to use language as a tool for understanding, not as a weapon for division. Because ultimately, communication on a mass scale really comes down to the stories we choose to tell. Language is the tool, our brains are the hardware, but we are the authors. We can write stories that build walls, or we can write stories that build bridges. And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. In a world that feels so divided, which story will we choose to write together?